on Court TV. Before we head out this hour, there is a picture we need to show you. This is Christiana Lynn Murray. She is 17 years old, last seen in Westland, Michigan on May 8th. If you have any information about where Christiana is tonight, call the Westland Police Department, that number on your screen, or you can always call 911 or 1-800-THE-LOST. Let's see if we can get her to a safe place tonight. A lot of people are worried about her. Don't go anywhere. We have another hour of live true crime coming up next. It's Vinnie Politan Investigates. Back after this. I'm Ted Rollins in for Vinnie Politan. We are investigating some of the possibilities that could explain the death of John O'Keefe. And we're asking the question, could two things be true at once? Here's the story. Rumors have been swirling ever since Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found dead in the snow outside a home in Canton, Massachusetts. In the search to find out how he died, there have been questions surrounding the people inside the home of 34 Fairview Road, the investigators, and, of course, the woman accused of killing him, his girlfriend, Karen Reed. Both sides have different explanations of the evidence, which includes text messages, a broken taillight, strange injuries, and much more. Prosecutors in Reed's retrial are again alleging that she hit and killed John O'Keefe with her SUV. But are there other possibilities? And could there be a cover-up? So in this retrial, we're basically, again, going through these theories of what might have happened from the prosecution and the defense. They've got their theories, but what about the other? You know, there's so many people who have come up with different versions of what possibly could have happened here, including whether more than one of these scenarios could have played out basically on the property of Brian Albert on that night in 2022. And the question all began with what Karen did or didn't do in the wee hours of the morning while behind the wheel of that SUV, of course. O'Keefe's friends, Jen McCabe, testifying in the retrial about what she heard Reed say, and this is a big part of the case, right after they found John in the snow.
When she got on the phone, I had told her, Karen, I saw you guys outside of my sister's house. And then she told me she didn't remember being there. And then she went on to say, she started saying, could I have hit him? Did I hit him? I don't. And then she just was just all over the place, like screaming my name, screaming so many different things. She was hard to follow or understand.
All right, so that brings us to our first question. Could two things be true at once? Could Karen have hit John, but not killed him? Let's bring in forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan. He's also the host of the very popular Body Bags podcast, and former New York police officer Mike Gould. Good Friday evening to both of you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time here. I want to show some of the images of Karen Reed's tail lights and some of the arguments about it. Here's part of each side's closing argument in last year's trial, starting with the prosecution saying the evidence points to the tail light damage coming from this collision and that it was John O'Keefe that caused the damage to Karen Reed's SUV.
You can see the damage consistent with the tail light at each and every point. You see the damage consistent with the tail light from the 507 video. You see the damage consistent from the 822 video from Lieutenant Ray from the cruiser camera video when he's pulling into the driveway. You see the damage consistent from the Dighton video at the defendant's home. You see the damage consistent from the right here, February 1st, 2022, when the search warrant is conducted, Ms. Hartnett removes all those pieces from the vehicle.
No DNA was found on the interior of that taillight. The taillight that they now claim crashed into his arm and shattered. No blood was found anywhere on that taillight or any taillight pieces, and no tissue was found anywhere on that taillight or any taillight pieces. But we're to believe that that taillight literally exploded on John's arm at 25 miles an hour with 1,000 pounds of pressure.
So, Joseph Scott Morgan, what is your take? Is it possible she hit him, bumps him, and then maybe something else happens to him? He trips and falls, he slips on the ice, and something else happened that Karen Reed may have A, hit him, but didn't kill him. That a possible scenario?
I would find that difficult to believe, because you have to understand there's another contributing factor here, and that's hypothermia. If he's initially struck, now he's got, the thing that's so fascinating about this case is what actually the forensic pathologist testified to, and he's got bilateral raccoon eyes, which means he's got a basilar skull fracture. He's directly impacted in the face. Most of the time you're going to see that with a single impact event. I can't imagine somebody punching him in the face or kicking him in the face and that sort of thing. It would have to come from a large object that has a certain amount of velocity that could drive into his face, fracture the small bones on the floor of his skull. That's why we call it a basilar skull fracture at the bottom. And then concurrently, you've got this other impact injury in the horizontal plane that is a laceration with the head being struck as it goes down. I'm fascinated by that. In addition to that, one of the more fascinating things for me are the insults to his arm.
So that's a great question, Mike. What happened to John O'Keefe? The first jury couldn't get their head around it.
Right. And I don't think this jury will either, Ted. Thanks for having me. So I'm one of the people you talked about that has an alternative theory to both the prosecution and the defense. And two things absolutely can be correct at the same time. So alcoholic-induced hypothermia is a real thing. So could a car, 25-mile, most people survive being hit by cars, particularly under this 30, 40 miles an hour. They may get serious injuries, but the survivability of the accident is pretty high, according to the National Transportation Safety Board. So I think that contact was made. I laid there. I was at the scene. I laid on the ground at night, in the dark, in the rain. And I can tell you there's rocks. There's in front of that flagpole are some concrete bricks, if I remember correctly. So two things can be correct. I think there was a lot of alcohol involved on both parts. Karen Reed, there's something called alcoholic amnesia, which we know as blackouts. Maybe you haven't had one, but in my younger days, I've had those things where I don't remember what I did.
So what's your theory? What do you think happened? I'm interested.
My theory is, in my world, in my universe, this was probably a reckless driving, leaving the scene. Intoxication was a huge element to it. It wasn't an intentional, premeditated murder. You know, Ted, if I murdered everybody I had an unsatisfactory relationship, I'd be a serial killer. So I don't see these things. There's just, everybody's trying desperately to get to beyond a reasonable doubt. But this thing is riddled with reasonable doubt. As far as I'm concerned, every piece of evidence, including the ME, every expert so far, including the arms.
Let's talk about what Joseph Scott Morgan was just talking about. Is that is the condition of the body? You got the arm. You have Let's listen to a description of what John's body looked like when he was found dead. Here is his friend Carrie Roberts testifying in this retrial about what she says she saw.
His body was completely covered, but his head was completely covered, so I started to dig around his face and his eyes, and his left eye was fine, but his right eye looked like it was huge. His legs were covered, his arms were by his side, he was on his back. Karen had lifted up his shirt, so now his shirt was down, but I was doing chest compressions so you could see his clothing. He had blood coming out of his nose and his mouth, and when I put the baby blankets under the back of him, there was blood on the blanket, so I think he had a cut on the back of his head.
Joseph Scott Morgan, if he is hit for the way you described his facial injuries, he would have had to have been hit by Karen in the face, correct? If indeed that's what caused his death? And I love the fact that snowplow's going by.
I think it's probably the most likely scenario. And here's another bit too. Those taillights are smooth and non-porous, so you're not going to get like a pattern injury. Let's just say that Mr. O'Keefe had been in Donnybrook with somebody at some point in time, or several people, where he'd been stamped on, punched, those sorts of things. Those are going to leave very specific identifiers. You're going to have superficial abrasion of the skin, underlying hematomas, and they'll be in multiple places. If you want to go with this idea that somebody had, bum rushed him and started beating him down in this environment. Even, I've seen many cases where people, for instance, have been stomped on, and you actually see the pattern of the shoe. You don't really see this here. You've just got like this directed force like this. And if we were to believe the taillight scenario, it's a smooth, non-porous surface, so there's not really a lot of a pattern there that would create, something left behind. One other thing is that we can't forget about what they talked about with the little glass shards that are in his face. Again, that's an impact-related event. You begin to think about it, somebody right-hand dependent, they're holding a glass, they get struck, this gets driven into their face. I don't know. But, as my colleague said, there's so many different scenarios and potentials here for lethality. I don't know if they can necessarily be effectively measured.
Do you, Mike Gould, rule out the snowplow at all? I mean, Higgins had one, and then Lucky comes rolling around twice in terms of, maybe the arm.
Yeah, I do rule it out, as well as the dog bite, the dog attack. One of the things that I do is examine dog bites, professionally, and I've looked at thousands of them. And these, if anything, are the marks of a scavenger made post-mortem while the body was lying in the snow. If you want to disagree with that, these marks do not resemble a large dog. It would be more in the size of a Chihuahua. My point is it's a scavenger, the striations, the scratches, and you can actually see the dental impressions of an animal in the middle. If you look at the striations to the left and to the right, those are claw marks created, in my opinion, by a possum. And then you see the nibble marks in the middle. You couldn't get those because nobody who is going to lay down with their arm out and allow a dog to scratch and nibble at them or bite at them. It didn't happen. This was post-mortem. And if it was a car that hit him, this would be hematomas, broken bones. So I don't buy that. I don't know why the defense is going with this dog attack. This wouldn't even require an emergency room visit, these marks. They're not bleeding. They're not vascular. So, no, I don't buy that.
Okay, well, the arm is interesting, though. You wonder what happened there, but to your point, maybe it is the scavenger. Guests are going to stay put. We're going to bring them back later in the show. But coming up, could there have been two fights? One with Karen and one with someone else in the house? Stay with us. VPI on a Friday. I'm Ted Rollins in for Vinny tonight. The national attention on the Karen Reed case continues to grow, in part because of the allegations of a police cover-up, and also, of course, because of the different theories about how John O'Keefe may have died. Here's the story. On a bitterly cold morning in January of 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found dead outside of 34 Fairview Road in Canton, Massachusetts. As the snow piled up around his body, so did the questions. O'Keefe's girlfriend, Karen Reed, is accused of second-degree murder, with prosecutors alleging she struck him with her SUV after a night out drinking. In her retrial, her defense is pointing fingers at people who were inside the home that night, including Brian Albert and Brian Higgins. They're also questioning the integrity of the investigation and putting a spotlight on Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor, arguing there's a conspiracy to blame Karen Reed for John O'Keefe's death. And some of the evidence that has caused a lot of debate in this case, of course, are the photos of John O'Keefe's arm, the scratches. There is not a definitive answer on it. I mean, let's face it. People look at this and it just gives you pause. In the trial last year in front of Judge Cannoni, the defense presented a dog bite expert who testified that these injuries are indeed consistent with a dog attack. The prosecution argued against that theory.
Were you able to confidently come to any conclusions or opinions about the nature of the injuries suffered by John O'Keefe, specifically as they relate to John O'Keefe's right arm.
Yes.
What is your opinion and conclusion concerning those injuries?
Those injuries appear to be consistent with an animal attack.
Can you be more specific in terms of the type of animal, or are you relegated to simply an animal attack?
Well, they are consistent with a large dog attack. There's a combination of both what I consider bite wounds and scratch wounds on the arm.
And that brings us to our next question. In our investigation, could two things be true at once? Could there have been an animal attack and maybe a slip and fall? Let's bring back our guests. Joined by forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan. He's also the host of Body Bags, the podcast, and former New York police officer Mike Gould. Mike, you referenced earlier, you don't think it's a dog attack. You think it's a possum, I guess, or a raccoon. And I like your point that post-mortem makes more sense because, you wouldn't let an animal keep attacking your arm after the first scratch or bite, right? There'd be a retraction. But what if he's out cold? What if John O'Keefe, our question, what if he fell? What if Karen didn't hit him? He's walking in. He took 35 steps according to his watch, and he falls on the ice, hits his head, and now there's an attack of some sort.
Yeah, 100%. I would, calling it attack and having a scavenger or even a dog feeding on the arm, not to be graphic and all due respect to the deceased, this is very common. This is when scavengers come out at nighttime, precisely at the time this would have taken place. And I do believe that. Like I said, I laid right in front of that flagpole. If you're highly intoxicated and you get bumped or pushed or hit by a car and you fall down and smash your face into the bricks that I believe was surrounding that flagpole, and then now your body temperature is going to attract animals, whether it's dogs or in this case, I strongly believe it was a scavenger coming to feed at the garbage cans, and they came across this, started scratching, nibbling. I can see the dental impressions on there. I know how many teeth a possum has. I know those are striations to the left and to the right, and those are nibble marks in the middle. Wouldn't require hospitalization. So and then the animal would be scared away. There's by any sound coming from the house, the animal would be scared away and be gone. You never see possums out, generally speaking.
Oh boy, Hank Brennan should reach out to you, Mike Gould.
I don't believe either side. So.
Joseph Scott Morgan, what's your take on the Commonwealth went hard in Karen Reed 1 with the idea that the tail light caused the injuries on the arm of John O'Keefe. Would they be smarter to say we don't know, or do they have to go all in on the taillight causing the arm injuries?
The taillight didn't cause those injuries. When I first saw it, again, although these many months ago, my first thought was, having worked for the coroner in New Orleans and worked for the ME in Atlanta for over 20 years, it looked like that these may have been generated by the undercarriage of a vehicle, potentially, with this kind of reaction. I've seen marks that are similar to this on individuals that have been run over by vehicles. They're kind of randomized, and that was really my first blush. I think the answer to that, though, that makes it a bit more confusing when there's like an image that I saw that had popped up relative to the sweatshirt, and they have little arrows pointing up and down the arm, and those look very punctate. And when we say punctate, it's like a puncture that goes relative to something piercing the clothing. And I would be very, very curious as to how thorough the testing would have been, an examination on that garment that he had on.
Could a snowplow cause that?
I think that you would have something that would be much more over the top than what we're seeing. If you saw somebody run over with a snowplow, you're going to have a level of, you're still going to have a level of mutilation that would take place. And this ain't no dog. I've had victims of dog attacks throughout my career, including post-mortem injuries on people found dead by animals, and those that have been killed by large dogs as well, ranging from children to the elderly. And once the dog gets into somebody, they don't quit. They go and go and go. And you're still left with this idea that he's got this massive complex of skull fractures in the front, and then he's got this mass of skull fractures in the back. And according to the ME, these don't communicate. These are two separate events. So you've got this massing that's happened on the frontal aspect. I think that's initial impact. And then you've got this other complex in the back. The fracture marks, when you look at her diagram, nowhere do they marry up there. So it's two separate impacts, head, face, and posterior.
So during last year's trial, the medical examiner testified about John O'Keefe's head injuries, describing just that. Let's listen.
Observing or looking at the skull fractures and their pattern, there appeared to be a central point with fractures radiating or originating from that central point and going into other parts of the skull. I knew at that point that Mr. O'Keefe's head had come in contact with a blunt object.
Would that be sort of the point of impact between the blunt object and Mr. O'Keefe's head?
Right.
Now, with reference to the fractures that you would observed, how extensive were the fractures that you observed, the multiple ones?
Well, there were multiple fractures. So by definition, multiple fractures in multiple chambers or parts of the skull. So I would say they were extensive.
Mike Gould, we don't know what happened. Isn't this reasonable doubt?
Yeah, completely. I find reasonable doubt in every element of this. And again, it's kind of like a Rorschach test. When I see that arm injury, I practically see an animal on top creating these injuries. As Joseph said, there's puncture wounds in the middle. There's scratches on the side created by razor-sharp claws, not that of a dog. Dogs' nails aren't quite that sharp. They use it for digging holes, where opossums and raccoons use it for climbing trees. So I just see it so clearly. I could actually, as I said, see the dental impressions of the incisors, the canine teeth, etc.
So bottom line at Joseph Scott Morgan, what do you think happened to John O'Keefe?
Struck by a blunt object with sufficient amount of force to generate a fracture complex in the floor of his skull on the front side, and then concurrently, or just following that, a large complex in the posterior basal skull. And in my experience, it takes a lot of force to do this, certainly more than a dog. And if that's what people are opining, I don't see that. And, the only other time, maybe with a large blunt object. I'm sorry?
Karen Reed's SUV hit him in the face, the first one, then he falls backwards, and that's how he picks up the other one, maybe on the curb?
Yeah, that was my supposition, from the beginning. That's kind of what I felt like, but again, the waters are so muddied in this case at this point in time. We're into a second trial at this point. And, in my way of thinking, most cases are won and lost in the first 5 minutes from rolling up on the scene. And that was less than sufficient, put it to you that way.
Yeah, and let's face it, everyone who watches this has a different version-ish of what happened. People say, I think she did it, but they don't know exactly how it happened, or on the conversely, she didn't do it, they did it. It's a lot of questions. Joseph Scott Morgan, Mike Gould, enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for your valuable time on a Friday. We appreciate it. Could Trooper Michael Proctor be disgraced for his text, but not be part of a conspiracy?
And he's been disgraced by his own agency, not by us, by the Massachusetts State Police.